We've done a number of episodes on this channel about the top 5 questions or the top 10 questions in the Bryan Kohberger charges. Now it's time for kind of a retrospective, an analysis of the top points that we've all raised about this case.
Not only that, but we're going to be discussing a controversial update now in the Kohberger case. Week after week, I tease Andrew over here on how could we possibly have more facts for this Kohberger case. And there's been a lot of crazy ins and outs, a lot of twists and turns, and a lot of things that have people scratching their heads. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
So, Andrew, you have been talking about this case for the thing is, it feels like we've been talking about it forever, but our YouTube channel isn't even a year old. So, despite all that, despite having such a new YouTube channel, you have been able to find so many facts, and we've even heard all these commenters and all this crazy stuff. So, what do we have in store for today?
Well, it's not really hard to find 5 new things to scratch your heads about every week in this case. All you really have to do, and the most important thing to do right now, since it's all we have, is go back and reread the probable cause affidavit that came out at the very, very, very end of 2022 and read it and analyze it and think about it, because still a year later, there are things in there that don't make a lot of sense. And we may return to that later in this podcast. But the thing that is of head scratching proportion right now as we do this podcast is there are plans now to, and by the time you see this podcast, the premises where the crime took place at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, is going to be demolished. The crime scene itself, which was where the Idaho 4 lost their lives, is going to be the victim of the wrecking ball. And that, I don't know, Lainey, I think that's extremely significant and extremely damaging to the case. What do you think?
Yeah, you would think that because the case is still ongoing, that they wouldn't really want to tamper with the location where everything happened. Is it normal for them to demolish a house like this in the case of a murder?
Well, there are views on both sides. I'll be honest, even though I have strongly held views that the building should stay up until the time of the trial. There are strongly held views on both sides, and the answer to your question is it is unusual because juries do take views. I mean, in the Alexander Murdoch case, the jurors were given a bus ride out to the Moselle property where, at that point, the alleged murders took place, and the jurors got down and out of their buses and walked around the premises, and you could see them. They walked around, and then after they rendered their verdict, again, in that case, those who interviewed them found that the jurors found that that was a very enlightening thing for them to do. It just gave them the feel of the place. You can sit in a courtroom and the attorneys can show their drawings and sketches and diagrams all they want. But since when does a drawing or a sketch or a diagram or even a computer animation come even close to actually seeing a site? You know what I mean?
Mhm. And especially because, we have this situation where crime happened in multiple different rooms. And then we also, have a survivor who seemingly came face to face with a killer who was able to see their bushy eyebrows. And one of the things that we talk about on our podcast and that people can look back in previous episodes and see is the fact that this crime happened in such a short time span. So I think that I agree with you, where it would be beneficial for the jurors to actually have the opportunity to go in and walk around, because if this is something that happened in under 20 minutes, what does a 20-minute walk around this house look like? What is a 5-minute walk around the house? Would you be able to find where you're going? There's a lot of questions with that.
Yeah, seriously. I'm gonna approach this in 2 ways, and before I do, I'm just gonna say that, you know what, the people that, are against or that say that the building should be torn down, say, oh, well, all the furniture's been taken out of there, all the possessions have been taken out of there, it's all empty in there. God knows what the forensic analysts have also taken out of there. So the acoustics aren't going to be the same. For example, did you ever move out of an apartment and you move all the furniture out, and when you go back in for that very last, geez, did I forget anything? Did I leave my phone in here? And you walk around and the sound carries in that building totally differently, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about, like, little I mean, traditional, like, going into a room and going, like, "Echo," it's just, like it definitely I agree that how you say the acoustics are totally different.
But okay, so that's one of the things that they say. But let me address that in two ways. Here in New England, where we are, it's cold. It's winter. The leaves are off the trees. The days are black and white. We get snow, we get rain. What's even worse, we get what the meteorologists dish out to us and call a wintry mix, which we never know until it actually happens. Which would you rather do, Lainey? Would you rather go to a nice beach down in Cancun and sit on the beach, or would you rather sit out in your driveway in the snow and the rain and look at picture books of the beach?
A really hard decision there, but I'm gonna have to go with my adventures to Cancun.
Okay. All right. So point made, but it's really very important to be in the physical space. It's incredibly helpful. I just have some notes here that I took from a really good experienced defense attorney who pointed out that jurors often want to make sure that they understand the space. During a trial, witnesses will testify about things that they uncovered in the home, or you're going to hear testimony about where things happen in the home. And looking at images of it is just not the same as being in the physical space. And neither the attorneys nor the jurors are going to be able to do that once the home is destroyed. What jurors really want to see is, what do things look like when they're standing in a room? What can you see from one angle? If you're in one part of one room, what can you see out from that room? The jurors might want to see what the lighting is like inside the house when the lights are on or when the lights are off. There are all kinds of things that you can take in if you present in a space, as opposed to someone just showing you some kind of documentation, even if it was measured down to the millisecond or the centimeter, with precise engineering tools. And I have worked with experts who go into a property and they have all of these very precise measuring tools. They measure the distances, the lengths, the widths, the heights, the angles. They do all of that, and it can be very precise. But it's also very, anesthetic, and it's not going to replace a juror actually being in that space. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do when you're in a space as opposed to somebody documenting it very clinically. So, really looking at pictures and secondhand information about what a space is like is really just not the same. It's secondhand. So, a view can be a very different feeling for the jurors and actually who actually need to see that space firsthand. So, if the premises is destroyed before trial, you cannot expect jurors to do their own work through the experience of others. They really need to see it, not only for the spatial relationships and the lights that I've talked about, but also the personal experience of just being there. I can sit here all day and show you pictures of my house and drawings of my house, but until you're actually there, you don't get that homey or non-homey feel that you get when you walk into my house. So, that is a really strong argument by a defense attorney about, why it's a big mistake to take this premises down.
Mhm. And one of the things too, like you said, is just like you don't get the same feeling from a picture. It's like when you're gonna go look at a house that they're selling or a home that you're interested in buying or renting. And a lot of the time you're gonna go in there, oh, this place is smaller than the photos made it look like. This place is bigger than the photos look like. Like you mentioned with the lighting, it's just like how dark do you think it's gonna be? Like if all the lights are turned off at 4 a.m., like what does it look like for someone walking in this direction? Like how were they able to see another person? And it does add that extra, layer of being in the space. I think you did a beautiful job at really, explaining how it's like you can have everything done perfectly, you can have everything measured perfectly, but it doesn't really hit until you're actually there, what the scenario must have been like. And you see the people in our comments, they'll people be going back and forth saying like, oh, they couldn't have seen this because this window was there, and where did this window lead, and what about this door and stuff. And it can get messy. It can totally get
And
messy.
there's an evidentiary pre-requirement for any kind of an animation or a drawing or a day in the life of anything like that. It's called substantial similarity. And what that means is, Mr. Engineer, if you're going to go out there and measure everything and then come back and put it on your computer program, that I'm sure some expert is going to testify on the stand under oath that this is a truthful and accurate and complete representation of the day of the crime, and we certify that this is the way it would have looked. Nuh-uh, because it's not the scene itself. It doesn't have the view of the scene. What substantial similarity means is that that portrayal that you have has to be substantially similar. So now, if the prosecution does it, the defense is going to poke holes in it. If the defense does it, the prosecution is going to poke holes in it. If the court says, guys, get your act together and do one of them, that's just a mess. So, it's just not a good idea. It's a bad idea.
I don't really fully understand the benefit of even just tearing down the house in the first place. I mean, I would assume that maybe it's because having that house on there, with real estate property value, I'm not too familiar with all of that stuff, but you're just gonna have like an empty field there. Are you gonna try to resell it? Like, who's
Well,
gonna want to rebuy that property?
the property was donated to the University of Idaho, so the university owns it now. So we can clear that up. The university owns it now. Their position is they just want to get rid of it. It's a bad memory. They're going to do it during the Christmas break while the kids aren't there, so that there's the least amount of impact to the children. Not children, college students. My apologies, because I was a college student once, and I wouldn't want to be referred to as a child. But anyhow, so the university has said they're going to take it down. Although there is going to be a memorial, that is not the spot where the memorial is going to be. The university has said that's something that their trustees and powers to be will determine at a later time. But for now, it's just going to be green space. It's just going to be a lot. So
Mhm.
that's the story with the property. They're just going to take it down just because it's depressing. That's what they say. It's depressing, and they want to get rid of it.
I mean, I totally agree with you, just that, it would be significant for the jury to be able to walk around that. And I, can empathize with, not wanting to be around a place that leaves you with negative memories. But I don't know, it feels, important. It feels relevant to me. I will never get to see that house. And, you know, maybe a lot of people will benefit from it being gone emotionally, but it's still just weird to think about, like, while this is still all ongoing.
Anytime you have a trial that has anything to do with spatial relationships or property, there's got to be a view. I've been on a number of views, and I just want to tell one quick little story. That is, I was involved in a boundary dispute. It's called an adverse possession case, and it was in a lot that went way back from the road, went way back into a wooded and weedy, overgrown area, and at the back it goes up a slope, and it's all rocky. And so, fortunately, there was no jury. It was a bench trial, which means it was only a judge. But the more we explained it to the judge, the more she shook her head in pretrial. And so the judge agreed that she would do a view. So a superior court judge came to the scene way out in the sticks, 6-7 miles off the interstate highway. She put on her boots, and my client and the next door neighbor's client, and I and the attorney for the next door neighbor helped the judge climb up the rock. Not in the sense that we pulled her up, but she was able to walk all the way to the top. And in the very top, we're doing kind of I don't want to say rappelling thing, but we're all like on our butts, climbing up on these rocks with the superior court judge. And she went all the way to the back of the property. We went all the way up the hill to the back of the property. It was a little bit muddy. We all had our boots. And we showed her where this line, what my client's position was, where the line should be. and what the other guy's position was, where the line should be, and where the respective surveyors had put the stakes. And so the judge had enough, and she wasn't mad at anybody. She just went back and got in her car and drove back to the courthouse. And so that was a view. That was a view.
Mhm.
I happened to win that particular case, but I think that having the judge go and take a look at that property was invaluable because, yeah, we had drawings, we had plans, we had surveys, we had all kinds of plans because the property had changed hands. It had been constructed at a certain time and reconstructed at another time. And so, you can have a million plans. I think our evidence book was about that thick with all, and there are these big plans that, anyhow. So that was just one. I could tell you other stories about views, but nothing replaces actually going to a scene and seeing what the dimensions are of a property. So I think it's really important in this case, and I think they're making a big mistake. I acknowledge that there is another view, but I think that the other view is wrong. One of the emailers now has gotten one of our commenters has gotten my email, and they've just sent me a volume of material. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Unless this stuff is corroborated, we're not going to go down that particular rat hole. All right.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that we see with a lot of the comments too, is it's really hard because a lot of you guys do make points that sound interesting and sound compelling, but it's really hard to find, like you said, any cooperation between any like a lot of these points. And that's, I like even looking at the comments, well, hopefully in the comments of this video, we love when you guys comment. Please comment all everything you think. But if you go through any of our old videos, it's funny because you will have like so many different people who are so set in their point, and all of these points and all of these theories, it's kind of crazy to see how different they are from each other. So we like hearing it, but at the same time, we also can't really put anything unless we have any actual evidence to substantiate it.
Yeah, no lawyer would want to repeat some of the things that people have emailed to me. And before, I think our audience knows that before I was a lawyer, I was a reporter, and you can't report stuff unless you have sources. And so there are a lot of theories out there. Some of them people put on the web, and we're not gonna, because it's just, it's wild, wild, wild stuff. Do I know who Emma Bailey is? Sure, I know who she is, but there's no confirmed, and her friend. There's no confirmed link between all of that in this case. And yeah, the guy in Pullman, Washington, a month later, I know all about it. I know all about it. Don't send me emails and say you should read this because I know all about it. Here's the only comment I'm going to make. If you go into the Urban Dictionary and look up the definition of party, one of the definitions of party is drugs. In other words, if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey man, you want to party?" That doesn't mean, "Hey, do you want to play pin the tail on the donkey and eat Doritos?"
That sounds like a good time.
And we know that was a party house. And I know I'm going to get hate for this. Just a couple of more quick comments. I've already said that none of this has anything to do with this, unless and until any of it's corroborated. The only thing that even comes close to even a glimmer of having any relevance is that the police did go to that house 3 times in the months before on noise complaints. August 16th, September 1st, and then again September 2nd, late night, because there was a lot of noise. So that's all I really have to say about that subject. If there's another point that we're making today, that is that, we talked about DNA in our previous episode. Touch DNA is not that reliable, and I read and gave a reference to a very scholarly article about touch DNA still not being an exact science. So I can only guess that what will come at the trial will be battling experts on that, because that's the only real close to direct evidence they have in the case, is that they found supposedly, allegedly, Bryan Kohberger's DNA was on the knife sheath, but there are questions about that DNA, and there's a fight going on about that right now with the court, and we're waiting for the court to come out with a ruling on that. And I also came across two cases in the last week, which maybe we'll talk about in the next episode because my throat isn't going to stay with me long enough to go over it today. And there are a couple of cases in Connecticut where the court was extremely critical of touch DNA. And in one of the cases, actually, a conviction of a man for assault was reversed based on touch DNA. Now, there were other issues in the case, but the court did come out very strongly and describe its reluctance to allow a conviction to be based in part on touch DNA. So those are my bullet points this week.
I do think it is good to point out, it's just like how you said, it's just like it's been known as like a party house, but really the only relevancy is that, there was some noise complaints done to the house. And I think that's an important part to distinguish because a lot of the theories that we see in the comments are related heavily to use of, illegal substances, but we aren't going to really report on any of that because aside from a few noise complaints, there's nothing really solid. And another thing to keep in mind with this case is that because this is something that's related to a college campus, and however many people were at the house before 911 was called, is that in a case like this, there can be a lot of he said, she said. So we're trying to do our best in presenting the facts in the best way that we can.
So well put. I think, why don't we go to our new feature of reading our interesting comments that we get from our viewers? We've got a ton of interesting comments, and you picked some, I picked some. So why don't you start?
Yeah, so this one is from our 5 Kohberger red flags video. And this is from Mickey Mantle 3233. And I found this one so funny. It's when Bryan Kohberger was pulled over, parentheses, twice on the highway to PA. It's obvious from the videos that he hadn't cleaned his vehicles for weeks previously. And I thought that it's like, a little bit in his defense, a little shady, but I thought that one was interesting comment to make.
That's crazy. This one is from Tia. By the way, I thought Mickey Mantle was long gone, so I'm glad that Mickey Mantle
He's
is up
here and
there.
watching our videos.
He's up there looking down on us. Thank you, Mickey. Okay, this one is from Tia Sarah, and she says, "Boy, those 8 grueling hours of getting the story straight must have been an interesting situation. BK didn't do this. The 28 days was them verifying BK would fit nicely into the story. I really think it's to cover up cartel activity, judging by the body damage, but I don't believe anything officials claim in this case. You guys have the best channel. Also, BK had a physical after this happened. No cuts or marks. He must be a total ninja." That's a comment. We're not saying any of this is true. We don't have any corroboration, but that's what people are saying.
Mhm. And some comments I have here. I have 2 comments, once again on the 5 red flags for Kohberger. We have Corey Davis, 7810, saying, "I don't comprehend how this crime came to be. There was no essay, there was no robbery. What is the motive here?" We also have Ghost Doodles saying, "The more I hear about this case, the more I think no way one person did this, nor anyone that didn't know the victims and people in that house somewhat," which is one of the things that we've talked about a little bit. It's kind of crazy, like the idea that you don't know anything about this house and you're coming in and, very quickly executing these crimes. But yeah, I thought those comments were interesting.
Here's a question, and it goes right to the point we were talking about before. Could destroying the house give the judge and law enforcement an out in setting BK free and judge dismissing the case? I'll answer that. No.
So this next one I have is from our collaboration with Everywhereville CJ. Um, and this is from Music Echoes. And I thought this was, interesting. And I have one that was similar, but I used to pick up and deliver blood tissue for Red Cross. Each time I walked in the door, it about knocked me down. Most of the plastic pouches of blood were inside either a walk-in cooler, several hundred bags, or a walk-in sub-zero freezer with 2 air locking doors closed. So this is kind of agreeing with the point where blood has like a very distinct smell and can be shocking in some situations.
Here's another viewer, Tracy Jambor, who asks a question and kind of answers it at the same time. Does a PCA, that's the probable cause affidavit, have to give all evidence or just enough to warrant an arrest? I believe there's a whole lot of evidence we know nothing about. Also, way too many variables and question marks, changes to the story and witness statements to make any kind of judgment call. Innocent until proven guilty. We can speculate endlessly, but we all just have to wait and see. This is about justice for the victims' families. Let's remember this is about 4 young people being brutally murdered. And so that comment I've got, unlike the last one that I read, I've got to agree with this one. The answer to the question, I think she gave it, but does a PCA have to give all the evidence? No, of course not. The probable cause affidavit only needs to raise enough factual assertions that by a preponderance of the evidence, the court can hold the person over, that an arrest can be made. So that probable cause affidavit was done late in 2022, before they arrested Mr. Kohberger and before they raided his house, his car, and his apartment. So yes, obviously a lot more evidence has come out since then. They're holding most of it close to their chests. It's true that they did reveal their inventories of what they took out of the car and the apartment and the house. But, after the experts get done with all of that, there's going to be a lot more evidence. And so, yes, there's the PCA. The evidence in this case is beyond the PCA, and we just don't have it all right now.
Mhm. So this comment is one of the comments that I was mentioning when I just read the last one. This is actually kind of like the exact opposite and like the contrary of the one that I just read. So this is Physics 4290 saying there would have been no smell like that. First of all, the bodies were behind locked doors. Which would have slowed the dissipation of any odors. I have heard professionals interviewed about this, and there would not have been overpowering smell like he's describing only after 8 hours. We know there were no screams because of the light bulb camera 50 feet away did not capture any. Dylan and Bethany likely thought they heard a fight and were glad when it was over. Ethan was in a fight earlier that night at the front. They probably thought it was a spillover from that. Concerning, yes. Not something to call 911 about. After all, Ethan wasn't alone. None of the victims were alone. There was someone to help them if they were in trouble. No one suspected bloody murder. Why would a 20-year-old woman who was sleeping alone attempt to intervene in a scuffle involving their roommate's live-in boyfriend? The survivors didn't know anyone was injured. And so I thought that was interesting. One, for the fact that it kind of is like the opposite of the last comment that I read, where one's saying like, oh yeah, like hits you right when you walk in, even though they're in coolers and airtight locking doors. And then this one is just like, no, professionals have talked about, that the smells wouldn't have been there. So, that kind of goes to highlight how much headbutting
Yeah.
and conflicting information we have in the comments. And one of the things too, how it says Ethan was in a fight earlier, and they probably just thought it was spillover from that and not intervening with roommates fighting. It's hard for me to remember sometimes because I'm fortunate that my living situation is not like this, but I have definitely seen firsthand and have heard stories from friends about having roommates that are screaming bloody murder at all hours of the night,
Mhm.
arguing over pimples and dirty dishes. So
Pimples.
yeah, that was one that I was involved in recently. There was a big scuffle, and hours later I confronted, like, what happened? It's just like, well, I'm breaking out, and this person said it's because of this or whatever, but I know it's not because of that. I'm like, this is what lasted an hour. So I definitely, as much as I forget sometimes, I understand that there's some crazy arguments in the universe. And
Yeah.
I understand like wanting to lay low and not be involved and just thinking, oh my god, it's quiet. But yeah.
Yeah, that's always been a big thing, a big question mark in a lot of people's minds about, did Bethany Funk, I'm sorry, not Bethany Funk, Dylan Mortensen, did she really have a frozen shock phase, or was there really something to take note of when this person who was clad in dark clothes and had bushy eyebrows, and then the subsequent 8-hour delay in reporting to 911? I mean, that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to think about, no matter which side you're on in this case. That's a problem. Let me read a short one with my throat being the way it is, and then maybe in a few minutes I'll be able to read one more long one. This is from I'm sorry. This is from Ghost Doodles. Ghost Doodles asks us, or says to us, the more I hear about this case, the more I think no way one person did this, nor anyone that didn't know the victims and people in that house somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rumbling that's out there. We don't, again, people, we're not saying any of these are true or false. We're just reading the comments that we get here, but this is what people are thinking about.
Yeah, and that's like, as all of this has come, everybody's unique, experience to life is going to impact how they view this case and the facts that are at hand. And so now back on our collaboration with Everywhereville CJ, we had a comment from Forensic Frenzy saying, I enjoyed this a ton and I wanted to provide some insight. I am an organ/bone/tissue technician for donation from deceased organ donors. So I perform the surgeries, which is crazy. Shout out Forensic Frenzy. So I perform all the surgeries to procure all the organs from my donors. When I get to a donor, depending on how long it took the family to make their final decision on whether or not to donate, the deceased is either at the hospital, just passed, and their family made that choice immediately, or the family took some time. We give them 24 hours, and therefore the deceased is kept inside the morgue fridge. And, parentheses, she says, sorry for how grim that sounds. And, it's the sad, unfortunate truth, the reality. But either way, I do have to fight through all the bodily fluids that secrete from the organs as the deceased body returns to room temperature. Nasty. Throughout the process of the procurement, overall, what the evil Everywhereville CJ show said here is almost always true regarding the orders that would have been building up inside the home over the course of time, and not each victim's body would do this in one swoop. This could potentially occur throughout the 8 hours, creating and brewing a slower developing order, but nonetheless, the odor would have likely been alarming in itself. So gross, nasty, but we're getting comments one way, we're getting comments the other way, we're getting, everybody's opinions are all over the place with that. And it is interesting seeing people who have like firsthand experience with this kind of stuff speaking out about it.
I'm glad you picked that one to read, because I almost picked that one to read. I did read it to myself, and I reached out to Forensic Frenzy because she actually has created a couple of podcasts on her own, and they're really interesting.
Oh.
She spends a lot. She doesn't just talk like me. She spends a lot of time, and she puts these, very thoughtful creations together, these productions that are backed up by facts and science. And so I've actually invited her on to collaborate. She says she's new, but she's very bright, and I hope that maybe down the road at some point we'll be able to at least ask her a few questions here on our show. But anyhow, I'm going to read a string. It's a short string, and bear with me. I hope my COVID-infected throat, I thought I was over it. It's been 10 days, but anyhow, no, it's been 6-7 days. But that's what the PCA told me, or the PCA. That's what my PCP. What's the difference? Here's our trivia question for today. What's the difference between a PCP and a PCA? All right, let's get serious. Okay, this is a string. First question is, or statement is from Beagle Mom. IMHO, Bryan implicated himself by asking, did you catch the others? I believe it was 2 to 3 perps plus a host of others on lookout. Okay. So then the response came from Rainy Days. We don't know if he did say anything, but supposedly it was said BK asked, has anyone else been arrested? If true, he may have been concerned that they arrested his whole family. Noodle then responded and said, it's never been verified. He even said that his PA lawyer has said he doesn't recall BK saying that. His Pennsylvania lawyer has said he doesn't recall Kohberger ever saying that. It only came from Bryan Enton. So after those 3 comments that went back and forth, I actually looked up the original quote from Bryan Enton. He is a very good reporter with News Nation, and he was doing a report. And here's exactly what he said, and I quote, I am told when Idaho quadruple homicide suspect Bryan Christopher Kohberger was in custody, He asked if anyone else was arrested. And those are the words that Brian Enton says that Bryan Kohberger said. Quote, asked if anyone else was arrested, unquote. Then Enton goes on to say, I'm told he had a quiet blank stare. So that's a mystery. We don't have a, obviously, Kohberger has had attorneys in Pennsylvania and Idaho. And obviously, he's not going to make any statements other than in court where he stood silent to the charges. But it's a mystery. It's a mystery. We don't know. A lot of people say, how could one person do this? But there it is. There it is. Those are what the commenters are saying.
Yeah, no, definitely thank you guys, everybody who chooses to leave comments. And, we can't address all of them in this podcast, or we'd be here for the next few years and then catching up for the next few years after that,
Yep.
reading more of the comments. But a lot of you guys do have a lot of insight. And, like I mentioned before, everybody's unique life lived experiences are going to impact them seeing this case in different ways. So, we appreciate the feedback to our videos, because sometimes, in all of our videos, sometimes you'll correct us, or sometimes, you'll dive deeper. And a big part of this, what I've been enjoying, is not only the conversation that we have, but the ability to be able to see what the whole community thinks and see how that evolves. And I think, as far as criticisms and critiques, and just, nobody, we don't know what's going on with this case with the gag order. There's such limited amount of information, but we do appreciate you guys kind of poking and prodding, not only at our brains but at everybody else's brains in the comments. So you really help paint this whole picture and make this podcast what it is. So I am grateful. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, and I am willing to follow down. I am willing to chase down leads. I am willing to open my mind. As I've said before, I've actually had commenters say, "Oh, so now that you think he's been framed?" No, I never said that. Maybe you were watching somebody else and then switch channels here. I've said it before, and I have to emphasize it again here. As an attorney, I take very, very, very seriously any criminal defendants and Bryan Kohberger's right to a presumption of innocence. I will give him that until the day a jury comes back and says otherwise. So that is our position on this show, is that we respect his presumption of innocence. My mind is open. I try to read as much as I can, even the stuff that's not corroborated that people send me in the emails. I read it all. And when stuff is corroborated, we'll read it. When it's not corroborated, we'll delete it. But, be nice, be respectful. People, I knew this before. I knew this before. People on the internet really have very strong feelings, don't they, Lainey? They're just,
Yeah.
I believe this, and if you don't agree with me, you're rubbish.
It's definitely, and with your history in media, I know you have like some experience with it, and having people even be a little crazy out in the field. But definitely, when allowed to kind of have like the veil of secrecy behind just a name on the screen, and sometimes it's an auto-filled name, although a lot of people seem to use their first name. So thank you for that little level of personal touch, guys. Shout out. But it is very easy to hide behind a username and just go off in text. And not only that, it's a serious case, so it reasonably has a lot of people worked up and emotional about this. Nobody wants to picture anybody they know being in this type of situation. But some people just want to be mean. But then, we'll allow comments of all, well, we don't allow comments of all types. We do some censorship if things get a little out of control. But you know, I'm glad you guys are passionate about your feelings.
It's kind of a check and balance on what we do to see that, I didn't read them all. I could be really self-serving and sit here and read all the ones that say, you guys do a great show. Or Kim Strickland said, thank you for the excellent info. Great job. I could sit here and read these all afternoon. And I could read the ones that say, you're a... We could read them all, but, we prefer the ones that are, and we read a bunch of them this afternoon that were thoughtful, and people, say, based on what I've observed from what I've read, here's what I think. So please be sure to give us your comments. We'll read them all. It's very rare that I delete them. If you're really nasty, I will. Yes, I will delete them. Absolutely. But anyhow, I think I've only deleted 3 or 4 of them since we've started doing this months and months and months ago. But anyhow, those are my closing
Mhm.
thoughts. Do you have any, Lainey?
No, I mean, just thank you so much for all the love and support. I know Andrew said that we won't really sit here and read all the ones that agree with us. And like, I do want to say, I see a lot of people say nice things about Andrew and myself. And I do want to say, hey, girl, like, yeah, we got a lot. And we're so grateful. And we really do appreciate it. And it doesn't just end at the podcast. You know, Andrew and I are talking about it outside of the podcast. I'm talking to my friends about it. And you guys really do make this community enjoyable. So thank you so much. Check out Forensic Frenzy's channel and peer pressure her to come onto our channel for a little collab. No, honestly, like don't bully anybody. I'm teasing. But thank you for everybody. It's been really fun and we love doing collaborations, and you guys in the comments are our own little collaboration. So thank you for being a part of the channel.
Thanks. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions. And that's
Yay.
that.